Well, in the last segment of rebuilding this 8-passenger Yellowstone Park stagecoach, I did get the main brake beam cut out, but I've got some finishing to do before I can install it on the undercarriage. The bit that I like to use in my router is kind of a long sweeping curve. I've heard some people call it a handrail bit. Well, these brake hangers have this little block shim that's put in there. They're an inch thick, 1.5 wide, 17 inches long. And this is the rear of the coach. These are where the heavy plates were for the washers underneath the clips. So if I measure from the edge of where that iron was back to the bolt, looks like I'm 22.25 on that one. Right at 22 on that one. So I'm going to go for 22. This one's 22 1/8. So that's the edge of our clip. I'm going to come back 22 inches. So that's where Our furthest back bolt needs to be. And double check we're square with our axle. There's 23.5. 23.5. So we're square right there. So with the brake beam installed, there needs to be 2 push rods that come up to the brake rod that the driver will actually operate. And I have remnants of those 2 old ones. And one of them is broken off on the part that attaches to the brake beam, and it's also broken off where these iron ends are that fasten it to the brake rod. But the second one here is complete on the brake beam side. So I can use that one to get a pretty fair measurement forward, but then how do I get a measurement when the other end is broken off? This is where the iron can be useful. There's a remnant here of where the end of this iron used to be, right about so. So I could go that way and then measure from the far end up here. But then how do I know exactly where it stopped, or is it a big deal? I need to be past this second bolt anyway, up into here somewhere. So if I did that measurement style, go from the rough end, and it's a little rough, but I can take my best shot there with this lined up and say we've got to be 49 to 50 inches. 49 would be right at this transition spot. 50 would bring it up to the taper here a little bit. But the added benefit here is I have a broken end that was actually in this iron. And it's set just like so. So if I lined these holes up, you can see it comes past this shoulder here up into this area. It begins this taper. So it could be possible. Did this actually come apart on this one? I think maybe it did. Maybe I could tap this back into place, get that joint tightened back up. So then that would fit right like so, with the holes lined up. So what if I get a measurement off of that? If I go at it that way, come out at 49 3/4, and that other end is a little soft. It's pretty rotted here as well. You can see it has a cross rivet to keep this end from splitting. So could this be another 1/4 inch? Well, one thing we could check would be this notch here. This notch actually goes to the brake beam itself. And that brake beam is 4.5, so very well could be that extra 1/4 inch. So I'm going to go with the 50 inches. Then what about our dimensions? With this notch, it's a little tough to tell how this end is, but this has a taper to it. So if I put a straight edge on the bottom here and follow this taper out, it very likely could be 2 inches. But then it seems to start to gradually taper all the way down. Within 5-6 inches, we're already down to 1 7/8. And down on this other end, we're 1.5 inches, which should correlate with our irons here maybe. Those are 1.25 inches, but this shoulders out a little bit past. I'd say our wood down to this last bolt is 1.5 inches. And all the way through, we seem to be about 1.25 inches. So I picked out 2 pieces that are, I think, extra long. I got 52.5, 56. So I'll trim these to 50. And these are both 2 inches by 1.25 inches. So these need to be tapered from 2 to 1.5 inches. And the question is, how do I do it? There's always more than one way to skin a cat, and there's more than one way to put a taper on a piece of board like so. One way is to taper it with pencil mark, cut it strong with a bandsaw, run it through the jointer, straighten it up. That'll sure work. But for whatever reason, I'm not going to do it that way. You have watched me taper wagon tongues that are 12 to 14 feet long, and I do it on my planer. I get such a long board, it's difficult to straight line that, and my little 6-inch jointer, it's tough to keep that to where I can float it out. So I kind of become accustomed to using my planer as a tapering tool. So if I set my gauge at 2 inches, that's going to be the widest part of these push rods, and I want to bring it down to 1.5 inches. Well, every revolution on my handle will give me a 1/16 of an inch of cut. So that would be a 1/16, that would be an 1/8. So there's my 2 inches. I'm always going to come back past and then come up to 0 to find my 2 inches. So to come up a 1/2 inch, I'm going to have 8 1/16 revolutions. So I'm going to have 8 revolutions to come up a 1/2 inch. Start out at 2, come up to 1.5 inches. So this planer has 2 feed rates. So all the way out is the 16, and it says don't change this unless the planer is running. But so in is 20 feet per minute, out is 16, so I'm going to go with the slowest rate that this planer will do. So this planer will cut comfortably 1/8 of an inch per pass. So 1 revolution is a 16th. I can get 2 revolutions on a single pass. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to take this and start it out zeroed at my 2 inches. And then through the course of this 50 inches, I'm going to pace myself to get 2 revolutions by the time I get to the end of my board. Then I'm going to come back and I'll zero back again to 2. And then my next pass, I'm going to try to time 4 revolutions through the whole length of this board. That's going to get me 1/4 of an inch. Then I'm going to go to 6 revolutions. It'll give me 3/8 of an inch. And then on the last pass, by the time I get to the end of the board, I want to have gone through 8 revolutions, which will give me my 1/2 inch. So I'm going to taper from 2 inches down to 1.5 inches by the time I get my final pass and 8 revolutions. There's our 1.5 inches on both ends. And is it the only way to put a taper in a piece? Obviously not. But it's an easy way to put a taper in. Save the step of bandsawing and then jointing. Me personally, I'm not a fan of a jointer. A jointer has its place. But as my children were growing up, the jointer was the last tool I would allow them to use. To me, it is right there in the top of the most dangerous tools I have in the shop here. And there could just open a whole discussion on what's the most dangerous tool. You know, is it the planer, is it a table saw, is it a bandsaw? All tools are dangerous. That's just a given. But a table saw, you know, you can cut your finger off. And there's lots of stories to where that finger most of the time can be sewn back on. You run your finger through a jointer, it is hamburger, and it's not going back on. It's just where I stand on a jointer. I use one, obviously, but I'm not a fan of it, except with caution and its certain place. Anyway, this will give us our push rods for this brake bar. So these have to come up underneath this ThoroBrace bar, and they're going to be bolted to the brake beam, but they're coming up at an angle, so we have to factor that in the joint. If I lay my brake rod here, this is where the bearing surface is going to be, so this push rod is going to be about in that position. And also this little block is going to be right here, so we're going to put this push rod in line with this part there. So I'm assuming we want these to run parallel with our reaches. 1 3/4, and similar-ish here. This one actually comes out at about 2 and 2 to line up with this bar. Well, that puts us at center to center 16 inches. We'll see if that lines up with the bolts on the old brake beam. These are the holes where those push rods were at. Center to center, right there. So 16s, same as the old one. So this joint seems to be at least a 1/2 inch. So right now, these are laying on this head block of the 5th wheel. And we don't want it to drag on that, so I'm actually going to prop it up off of that. Pencil is going to be about 5/16. Pretty close. So our joint should be right there. We want this to be up, what, 1/2 inch did we say? And do this for the other side too. Just using my finger as a gauge to follow the top of this brake bar. Give me a consistent line, but those should match up. So if you're on top of your game, which most of you are, know that when I cut this notch, I'm actually going to increase that angle a little bit. But this is going to get us close. I can take my file and do some fine adjustments if we need to. That actually didn't turn out half bad. It'll work. So these actually get a little chamfered corner, starting at the iron up front, both top and bottom. And it's going to stop here just shy of where a little metal brace is going to come. But this goes clear to the end and just a slight round over on the end here. Well, I'm not really sure where all the time goes. I had it in my head that I'd make it further along than this, but I guess there's always next week. Appreciate you coming along. Thanks for watching.